Wooster is probably a better word than Worcestershire, or whatever it's called. Hello there, and welcome to the If It Swims podcast, the multi-species English podcast for 1313 Media. I'm Bret Bolton. Happy New Year's, guys.
Happy New Year.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Happy
Join
New
me
Year.
for episode 12 are Justin Wingert.
Hey, man. Happy New Year to you.
And Mr. Dave Spear.
Guys, I am happy to be here.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us on this Christmas / end of year / Hanukkah / Festivus episode.
A Festivus for the rest of
Whatever
us.
you and yours celebrate, I hope it's a good one. This month, we're talking about some recent fishing trips, followed by the fish of the month. But we're going to kick things off by tasting some carp live on the pod. A couple notes about these carp. Several years ago, I got fed up with all the talk about how bad carp are to eat, while knowing they were brought to this country in a federally backed stocking plan to help feed the growing population. So I started trying ways to eat them. And I found for me, the best method was home canning. And it allows me to store fish in the pantry for times when it's too cold, too hot, or just too busy to catch fresh fish. I was also aware of the Christmas carp tradition in Eastern and Central Europe, where a carp was prepared during the fast leading up to Christmas. It was often fried and served with plum sauce. Did anyone use a plum sauce in their preparation?
I did not. I saw a recipe that used it, and I thought, hey, that
No
sounds
way.
good, but I don't. Yeah, I just looked up carp cake recipes, and one of the ones it brought up was a Polish recipe for the holidays, and it involved a plum sauce. And I thought, that sounds really good, but I don't have plums or plum sauce.
That's a good point.
I've got some hoisin in the fridge, but I don't know if that counts.
I don't think it's the same
Probably
thing.
not.
Oh, man. So with all that, we're going to be trying some carp I canned a few months ago, with each of us utilizing our own recipe for fish cakes, or whatever you want to call them. Guys, let's eat some carp.
All right, let's do it.
And to make the listeners happy, we'll be tasting while the others are discussing recipes to avoid weird sounds on the pod. So, Justin, let's start with yours. What's your recipe?
Okay. So I followed a salmon cake recipe, and then I added a bunch of stuff to it. It's besides the carp, we have I used wheat thins. Actually, the recipe called for saltines as a binder, but I use ground up wheat thins because I like wheat thins better. And then I got, it has some Dijon mustard, some spicy mustard, some mayo, and then egg substitute, which is what the recipe called for, rather than actual eggs. And then I minced up a bunch of onion, Fresno pepper, and garlic, along with some salt and pepper and some Old Bay. And then I mixed it all up and fried it.
That sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty similar.
I'm hoping it is good.
It sounds pretty similar to the recipes I found.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that does sound good.
It's it's a pretty basic fish cake recipe that I just added some extra stuff to. Oh, lemon juice too.
Oh, of course.
Gotta have some lemon juice.
Mr. Spear, what about yours?
Real similar. It should be known that I have not performed cookery of any kind in probably decades.
Wow.
My wife is a hobby cook, and she takes over that duty.
Oh.
And so I did, a similar thing, right? I Googled fish cake recipes, found some salmon cake recipes. And having just tasted mine while Justin was describing his, I really could have used a lot more salt. But I have many of the same ingredients. So mine's just the fish, panko breadcrumbs, red bell pepper diced up real small, a little bit of Dijon, Worcestershire sauce, and a little bit of mayonnaise and an egg.
Wait, what kind of sauce?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Worcestershire.
Apparently.
Nobody does. That's why I asked.
I think my mom called it Wooster.
Wooster is probably a better word than Worcestershire, or whatever it's called.
Worcestershire.
Yes.
Got some of that Worcestershire.
Mine's similar. It's pretty simple. Panko breadcrumbs, chopped onion, chopped bell pepper, a little bit of jalapeno mixed into it also for the fun of it. Some Old Bay, of course. 1 egg, and mixed together. Set it in the fridge for a minute so it would kind of stiffen up. Added some fresh panko on the outside after that because I like them crispy. And then usually fried in oil. Tonight, it's a weekend that we're recording, so fried in butter.
I should have thought of that.
And ready to go. I had one while you guys were chatting, and I like it.
Yeah, I've been eating mine while you guys have been describing them, and they're pretty damn good, actually.
Dave, did you taste it straight out of the jar?
I did not. I considered it, but I just was kind of in a rush.
Oh, and okay. I mean, the first time I tried it, I was scared to taste it out of the jar because, first of all, it looks disgusting.
It didn't look great.
Yeah.
I'm sure if canned salmon was in a clear jar, it would look disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it didn't look any different to me than any other canned fish.
Right, but it does not look appetizing. But it's good.
Sure.
Yeah, I did actually taste it right out of the jar, and I was surprised by how much it really did just taste a lot like canned salmon.
Isn't that weird?
Very surprisingly mild.
Yeah.
Yeah, very salmon-like.
Yeah.
Canned salmon specifically, obviously.
Canned salmon-like, exactly. This is part of my zombie survival food preparation.
I like it.
I don't care how bad the zombies are. I can still go get a carp.
I was employed in the IT industry. I still am, but in 2009 in the Great Recession. And I got laid off of 2 jobs within the space of 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my wife I was going to the river to catch us some carp and buffalo. And she's like, I'm not eating that. I was like, well, if we get really poor, I bet you will. And it turns out this carp is delicious. In fact,
it's really good this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My biggest regret really is I started with looking at a couple of recipes, and one of them was for literally 30 ounces of canned salmon, 2 cans.
Yeah.
And I weighed
mine
this
was
carp.
a big recipe too.
Yeah, and I only had 3 ounces of carp. So I was trying to be careful with the Worcestershire sauce and the Old Bay because it has a lot of salt in it. And I was too careful.
Got you.
Yeah, I had the opposite problem because mine was my base recipe was for 32 ounces of salmon. It's to feed like 4 people. But I would just try to take down like how much mayo and mustard and stuff it uses, and I ended up using way too much. So they were really wet, and I had to go and get a bunch of extra. Yeah, I went and got breadcrumbs and put a bunch of extra breadcrumbs in there and kneaded them up for a while until they were a better consistency.
It does work pretty well. It's surprisingly good. In my household, we do not buy canned salmon anymore.
You buy canned
carp? I wouldn't.
There's no reason. Oh, just canned carp. Now, if you're curious, that's 100 minutes under 10 pounds of pressure. Which,
I don't know enough about pressure cooking to know if that's a lot or not a lot. Well,
pressure cooking cooks faster.
Mm-hmm.
So 100 minutes.
That's a long time.
In our chat, Dave asked. He was clarifying this was already cooked. And my answer was what, Dave?
Yeah, I cooked the holy hell out of it.
Cooked to high holy hell.
High holy hell. Yeah.
So cool. It was a fun experiment, eh?
It was. And
it's hard to describe how surprisingly normal tasting that is.
Yeah, I would do it again for sure.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with these.
It makes a hell of a sandwich.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would definitely, I would add some spicy and make a heck of a sandwich.
Yeah.
I will say that this is only the second time I've tried carp. I did try it about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was I don't know, it was like a carp appreciation. I can't remember the deal, but it was a bunch of people carp fishing. Do you remember? Were you there, Brett? I think
I wasn't there, but I knew about it. It was a Parks and Wildlife event. It was basically a local DNR event.
Where was this? I might have been there.
It was out in Joe Pool, wasn't it?
Joe Pool Lake up in Dallas.
Probably not then. I was thinking there was one on Grapevine that I went to.
It could have been. Parks and Wildlife, which is Texas's name for our DNR, showed up. They caught some carp and they deep fried them right there on the bank.
Yep.
And how'd that
That's
taste,
pretty
Dave?
cool.
Delicious. Absolutely delicious. Like any other deliciously fresh fried fish.
Yeah, I mean, once you fry it, it doesn't matter that much.
And in fact, that there was a game warden that did that, and he used a technique of score. I don't think scoring was the name, but it's essentially like scoring the bones.
Probably is the name. That's
No, I think that is. Yeah, I think that is called scoring.
They take the fillet and they cut it thin down to those Y bones.
Yeah.
So the hot grease
Gets in there and
reaches those Y bones and cooks them away to nothing. You know,
they basically become nothing. The only thing that's left is the real big bones. You know, the big backbone, or
those are easy to find anyway.
Right. But I had done that, and then my father-in-law grew up in Nebraska, and apparently there's a very famous restaurant in Omaha that serves carp sandwiches.
Yep, you bet.
And they're well known. And I have just never been to Omaha at a time. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times, but not at a time to eat lunch, or I would have,
Yeah, I know that. Some places
that sounds like
in
a good
Nebraska
If It Swims road trip.
And Kansas, and I'm up for it. And some other places out there do carp, fried carp sandwiches. It's a known thing. And don't forget, they came to this country as a food source, not for sport, not escapees from somebody's farm or anything else. The common carp was brought here to feed the population, and then it did feed the population. And then we polluted our water so much that only the carp could live in it, and blamed the carp for it.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
Typical humanity.
Yeah. They're not typical Americans, typical humans.
Yeah, of course. And it's just one of those things. Carp are hardy enough that they can live just about anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you see a carp living somewhere that looks nasty, it's got shopping carts and shopping bags and trash in it, and you see this alive fish, and of course you assume there's no other fish there, which is probably wrong.
I fished that spot.
I was going to say I fished that spot.
Yeah, right.
Oh, the joys of urban fishing.
I have eaten carp once before as well. Just to add to that particular discussion, it was many years ago when I was I was a teenager. I was probably like 17 at the time. We were living in Minnesota and we were fishing a gravel quarry, and I caught it. At the time, a huge carp, which was the biggest fish I'd ever caught, and we ended up deciding to keep it because we wanted to weigh it. And we figured, hey, we can smoke this,
sure,
because Dad had just gotten a smoker, so we took home a really big carp. It was we weighed it at 18 pounds, but we later realized the scale we had was busted AF, and I would now estimate it at probably at least 25 because it barely even fit in the cooler we had. It was a big fish, but
it's a big fish.
We filleted it and chopped it into chunks and marinated it and smoked it, and it was really good.
Yeah,
I mean, it's bigger than I would normally keep a carp, especially now.
Right.
But I was 17.
Sure.
I wanted to weigh my biggest fish, and Dad's like, "Hey, we can smoke it." So we took it home and smoked it, and we had like chunks of smoked carp we were eating for a week, and it was really good.
It's not bad. I just noticed that. I believe Dave, did you just finish off that plate?
I did.
Nice.
I'm about to.
Would you have ever thought?
Well, I mean, because I'd had the experience before, but I feel like I was not nervous, but very curious the first time I had it. Just because of all the things we've all heard. We've all
heard the stupid jokes. We've all heard the how bad it is and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the first time I had it fried was at an event similar to that, Dave, but it wasn't a Parks and Wildlife event. And my final verdict on that, tastes like fish.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I had my wife get a jar of salmon because I was going to do a practice run today because I just don't cook.
Okay. I gotcha.
And then I was like, well, I might as well cook them side by side, and I'll have more of the salmon in case I burn them and don't get the temp right. Well, I didn't end up doing it, but now I kind of wish I had. I can say, even though I don't have salmon cakes in front of me, I can say with almost 100% certainty that the salmon cakes would have tasted more like fish than that carp cake did.
I've noticed
that could be.
The carp patties do have a lighter flavor. Now, there's a couple reasons for that, I'm betting. When they can salmon, they chop the head off, pull the guts out, and just jam it in a jar or into cans. I filleted this fish, removed most of the bloodline, remove the skin, and then canned it.
Sure.
So I was using the best parts. Because it's a carp, I can get plenty of them, and I don't need to save every single penny when I'm doing it.
Right.
Yep, makes sense.
And I'm sure that's probably the big difference, because they will put, scales, tails, and all go in those cans.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And sometimes you notice that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I have
yes,
now
sir.
Also finished off my plate.
Nice. I finished mine off while you guys are going earlier too, so pretty good.
Excellent.
Even though I already ate tonight, I still finished it off.
Yeah, me too. I ate immediately before I ate that.
So did I, yeah. Oh man, that's fun. That was cool. So
Well, Bret, thank you for the carp.
You'll do it again.
Definitely.
So if I showed up on a camping trip with jars of carp, I'm not getting kicked out?
No.
Definitely not.
Oh man. Awesome. Speaking of camping trip, let's talk about some recent fishing trips. We all made it, right? Somewhere?
We sure did.
All right. Well, I'll kick things off. So every year, I try to make it down to the Texas coast to do surf fishing for bull red drum on Black Friday and the Saturday following. I'm usually joined by one or two people. This year, Dave and Justin made it. It turned into a complete If It Swims trip. It was awesome.
Right?
Justin's been down a couple times.
Yep.
This was Dave's first time joining us for this specific trip.
Sure.
He's fished more than any of us combined, but this particular trip, his first trip with us. We sat by the fire, camped on the beach, mostly. So, Dave, it was awesome having you down there to class up the trip some. Did you dig it?
Oh, I loved it. And I told these guys when I got home, it was like a day and a half later, but I was like, all right, I successfully got all the sand out of my truck and cleaned all my gear before I bought surf fishing gear, because you have to understand, I don't own surf fishing gear. And so I was borrowing my good buddy's gear here. And the first thing I did is I sat down and I started Googling, like, all right, I need at least one surf setup. It was a blast.
Yeah. It's
Well, he liked it so much he went out and bought gear to do it next year.
Not yet, but I'm on my way.
You're looking at it.
Oh man, Justin, your trip was well more If It Swimsy than the rest of us. How'd your trip?
That's true.
My trip was excellent. I caught a good number of red drum, which were obviously awesome. They fight really hard. They taste great. We didn't keep any, but they fight really hard. And more importantly, for the If It Swims podcast, I caught multiple new species for me. The biggest of which was my first ever black drum.
Okay.
I caught on a quartered crab way out in the surf. We weighed him at about 15 pounds, so not an immense black drum, but certainly a very cool experience for me because it was the first one I ever caught. I've been down there 3 times, I think now.
I think so.
And that was the first time that I've actually caught a black drum while we were fishing the surf or any of the other areas down there we go to sometimes. So I was more excited to have caught the black drum than I was to have caught the larger redfish that I caught before that.
You're more excited to catch that hard head than the redfish.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was about to ask you, so I knew, in our text chatting, Justin mentioned that he had caught 3 new species, and I knew 2 of them, but I was like, what was the third one? So it was the black drum.
Yeah, the black drum was a new species. I also caught hardhead catfish for the first time, and I stopped at a little boat ramp on the way out and was like, you know what, I'm not doing anything else. I'm going to sit here and fish for an hour or two. And they ended up catching another new species, an Atlantic croaker, which I didn't even know what it was. And I was like, I texted it to the other guys, and I was like, what the hell is this thing? Dave's like, I think that's a croaker. So I Googled it, and sure enough, Atlantic croaker.
Yeah. It's another drum, wasn't it?
At first, I was like, my very first thought was, there's no way I came all the way down here and caught a freshwater drum in a saltwater boat ramp. Is there? And I was like, no way, this thing has stripes. This is not. I don't know what
Yeah.
this is, but it's
Yeah. Plus,
drum family for
it
sure.
hadn't been raining that much, so there weren't any freshwater drum down
Mhm.
there. It's a sad day when you catch
Yeah.
a freshwater drum at the coast.
Croaker is a real popular speckled trout bait.
I would imagine it looked like if I had a bigger gear with me. I mean, I had the rods we were fishing the reds and stuff on, but I didn't have any big hooks because Bret had geared us up basically. So if I had a bigger hook, I could have like hooked him and winged him out there a ways.
Sure.
I caught a pinfish there too, but those I had caught previously.
Yeah.
The last trip down there.
Did you catch that croaker on bait or
Yeah, I caught it on a piece of shrimp.
that shrimp you snagged?
Yes, I snagged a shrimp on a rattle trap, and I was like, you know what? You're bait, buddy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I
Man.
cut him up into little pieces, and I caught a croaker on him.
Everything eats shrimp, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I only caught 2 fish down there this trip. One decent bull red on half a crab. And the last night of the trip, I think after Dave left.
Yeah, he had just left. I think, when you caught that.
Yeah. I picked up a bull red just over 40 inches
Yeah, that was a
on
beast.
on a mud minnow at about 195 meters.
Oh, wow.
Oddly specific, right?
Right.
Not my most numbered fish trip down there, but the trip is always fantastic. And for me, it's a partial break from the real world. There's next to no phone service down there.
Yep. You
And I
get
can just
service
sit
like
down. Yeah. nothing.
once every 7 hours for about 10 seconds.
Yeah. And I can sit in there and not. I have a hard time making a conscious decision to put my phone down.
Mhm.
But if I'm forced to because there's no service, it makes it a lot aching.
Makes
So
it a
That's
lot
true.
easier.
I appreciate the break from that. And there's not much better than sitting by a campfire with my arms aching from a big fish, telling stories and jokes with fellow anglers. Man, it's a good trip.
It's a
It's a
great
good trip for around Thanksgiving too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not obvious, but those hours are priceless and pretty important in life in the end, right?
That's true.
Definitely.
I'll probably put a full write-up on the ifitswims.com page. Dave, you should have taken a picture of that Roach Motel you stayed at.
Ah.
So I could add that to the post.
Well, my trip was a little different than these guys. I have some physical and personal deficiencies that required some electricity. And I decided to go on the trip at the last minute. So I did stay in a motel. And it felt a little bit dirty leaving the guys on the beach at the end of the day. But on the other hand, I got to spend good 8-10 hours out there in the surf.
Mhm.
And I also only caught 2 fish, but I didn't care. I had a great time.
It's not a
That's the point. We're there to catch fish, but nobody's like, oh no, I only caught a couple or whatever.
yeah.
We're there to hang out with each other, and we're there to be fishing, basically.
Exactly.
Right.
Catching is secondary.
Right. Although
It's a lot of fun when you do.
it is nice when you do, yeah. And those fish will wear you
Yeah.
out if you let them, yeah.
I had that stretch on Saturday where I caught like 3 fish in a row for some reason, and I was by the time I got that black drum, I was like, I think I'm done for a little while.
not many days you have to stop because you're tired, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was great. I'm glad you guys joined me down there. It's fun. Oh, one last note on this. I am not super happy with my current fishing drone.
Mhm.
I'm looking for a new company to go with. If anyone has any suggestions, send them in at gear@ifitswims.com. I'll see what's out there and probably before the next trip down there, make a swap.
Sweet.
I think the next drone needs to have some sort of spearfishing capability where you can fly it over the water and then release a harpoon at specific times.
I think the next one also needs to be able to go out to the sandbars and just pick up the drum for us and bring it in so we don't have to wait out there in our shoes. Like, look, we've already landed it. He's 10 yards out in 6 inches of water. Now I got to wait out there and get him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. Oh man, it's a good trip. I'm ready to go back. You guys want to do fish of the month?
Yeah.
Is it the Gulf killifish?
It is not the Gulf killifish.
No.
Is it killfish or killifish?
I have no idea.
All right, excellent.
It's spelled killifish. I don't know. Maybe the I is silent.
Sure. Oh man, this
Maybe
is a
the
fun
F
one.
is silent. The Gulf.
It's just a kafoosh.
Wait, which F?
Kafoosh.
What if they're both silent? The Gull Killa-ish.
The Killiish. Oh man. So our fish of the month for this month has a native range in the eastern and central United States, southeastern Canada, and northern Mexico. But the species has been introduced in every state in the U.S. and all over the world, and has made its way onto the list of most invasive species in the world.
I have a pretty good guess.
Excellent. We'll hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
It is recognized as the cause of extinction of a species of grebe in Guatemala from their introduction in 1960 until the grebe's final 2 specimens being spotted in 1989.
Wait, time out here. Guys, a grebe is a bird.
Oh, yes, sir. A grebe is a bird. That's a good point, Dave. Thank you.
A grebe is a bird. It is a water bird, but it's a bird.
An excellent point. An excellent point. This fish is one of 13 members in its genus and one of 34 extant species in its family. Your guess changed yet, Justin?
A little bit.
Interesting.
The grebe I'm less certain about now.
The IGFA lists a tie for the world record at 22 pounds, 4 ounces from Shiga, Japan in 2009 and from Georgia in 1932.
All right. Maybe it's changed back.
Yeah.
I think we have our answer.
It may have changed back.
For a lot of it, that gives it away, doesn't it?
I wasn't so sure after the grebe. I was like, wait, how big are these birds? But now I have a better idea.
That thing ate all the grebe's food and then ate the baby grebes, didn't it?
Wow.
So
just for fun, let's see some nicknames. Steven Tyler.
I'm going to steal that one.
By the way, it's the only reason we're doing this.
Okay. Let's see where this is going then.
Potter's fish. Argy.
What? Okay.
I hadn't heard some of these. Growler.
Growler?
Gilsdorf bass.
Now, growlers, that's going to bring a whole new
Gilsdorf?
means to going to the brewery and asking for a growler on your way home.
Oh,
Could you give me a growler on the way out?
Oh, man. What is Gilsdorf?
That's hell if I
Fair
know.
enough.
Something backwards.
Nope. Oswego bass. Green trout.
Green trout.
Sure. Swamp donkey.
The swamp donkey?
I've always liked the name ditch pickle.
Yeah, me too.
Green bass, wide mouth, big mouth, bucket mouth, black bass, and finally just largy. Justin got it super early, right?
I think
Yep,
Bubba should be on that list.
Bubba?
Bubba.
I had that one figured out. Basically, I was like, well, the range, he said, it's also one of the most invasive. I know what it is.
Yeah. That does give it away. And the record does as well. To people who grew up angling, hearing that record, the 1932 record from Georgia, that's a known record.
Yeah,
That's
so I wasn't
most-
sure how big, like I said, I wasn't sure how big a grebe was. So I was like, well, wait, maybe it's some kind of big catfish. Nope, never mind. It's
When you said it was introduced to every state in the country, I was like, that's got to be like, okay, it's not going to be one of the trout. It's probably the largemouth bass, but then you're like, and it extincted a grebe. And I thought to myself for a second, I could see a bass extincting a grebe, but also my mind started to go towards toothier critters, things like bowfin. But then I was like, wait a minute. They didn't introduce bowfin to every state in the U.S.
No, they did not. And bowfin are not considered invasive anywhere, I don't think. Bowfin
Probably
don't
not.
do a good job of living outside of their range.
That makes sense.
Probably better.
Right?
Because they could wreak some havoc somewhere, right?
Well, I think if we've hit the largemouth bass, we might have hit the end of the road for fish of the month.
We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss that in a minute.
Dave's quitting the podcast.
He's done.
I'm done.
Largemouth bass. I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. So I do have one more bit of information, which is kind of interesting. So yes, you guys are correct. The largemouth bass, Micropterus seminoides, right? Or is it Micropterus nigricans, the largemouth bass? Or maybe I mean the Florida bass. That's right. As of 2024.
Oh, really?
The Florida bass and largemouth bass are now considered genetically separate species.
Oh, well, now I gotta catch a identifiable Florida bass just to say I've done it. I'm sure I've done it, but
Justin, you live in Texas. You might need to catch an identifiable true largemouth.
Largemouth? Yeah, that's fair.
Our state has
pretty much all they've ever stocked.
Right. And from what I've read, is the only way to know is genetically anyway, so you couldn't see it.
Oh, so we can't get away with any of our dumb tricks like counting fin rays or looking for tooth patches.
Yeah.
Looks like it's purely genetic, only way to tell. But it is a different species now, which is quite interesting.
That's pretty cool. Well, I'm sure I've caught both.
Yes,
already,
in a close enough species. I think they can when they hybridize, they're still viable fish as opposed to most hybrids that become sterile.
Yep.
The 12th one, our 1 year anniversary, was the reason I did the largemouth, but also because of that recent news that the Florida bass is now a separate fish.
And also the Steven Tyler joke.
And that was not my joke.
Oh, really? I thought you made that one up.
No, that was actually on the list of nicknames for the fish.
That's amazing.
From now on, by the way, it's just Steve when I see one.
Yeah, I caught a couple Steves again.
Right.
I caught a couple of Steves earlier this week. They were nothing to write home about, but
caught a Steve on a rattle trap.
Yeah, see? It's perfect, isn't it? So we'll go ahead and do this part. As you know, Dave and Justin don't know the fish beforehand. So any of this info is off the cuff. That said, what can you guys tell me about them? And for this species, what are your PBs? And that's plural because I have 3 separate ones.
Oh.
I only have the one that I know of.
Dave should have 2 PBs.
Okay. So obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is that they are, some people don't know this, but they are a sunfish.
They are the largest sunfish in the world.
Yep. The largest sunfish rather than a true bass.
Right.
They have large mouths.
They do.
They're voracious predators. They, as the fact they made an entire bird species. Yeah, exactly. They made an entire species of birds go extinct. They generally will chase and eat anything they can fit in their mouths, and sometimes things they can't fit in their mouths.
And their mouth is substantial for the size of the fish. It is.
They have an enormous mouth and then a very aggressive attitude. And there have been largemouth that have died because they choked on prey that was too big for them.
True.
There's a famous picture I saw once of a largemouth that had tried to eat a smallmouth, and the smallmouth was just sticking out of. Yeah, Brett's making the gesture, just sticking out of its mouth, and the fish just choked and died.
Yeah, crazy.
Nice.
They will pursue any kind of artificial lure, just about. From your topwater to your any kind of crankbait, obviously like plastic worms and everything in between are all great bait for them. They, people often will get mad if you eat them, but they taste delicious, and I will eat them.
They are sunfish.
They are a sunfish, exactly. That's how you know they taste delicious. As far as my personal PB, it's not super huge by largemouth standards. It's about 7.5 pounds.
That is a nice fish.
Nice fish. Not a crazy huge largemouth, but I don't pursue largemouth exclusively. So 7.5 pounds just fishing for multi-species is a pretty fine largemouth.
It's a great fish. Dave, what's your biggest there?
It's pretty similar.
Also, not a huge full-time bass angler either.
No, I didn't have a scale with me, so I only had to estimate. Okay. My largest bass was in the 7 to 8 range, and it was with the fly rod actually, fishing on a bed.
Oh, nice!
Which I didn't know at the time was somewhat frowned upon. I just didn't know it, but but yeah, and I've never caught any bass anywhere close to that size since. I mean, Most of the bass that I've caught are 3 pounds and down, and I haven't even caught that many 3-pound bass.
So you mentioned 3-pound bass. 3-pound bass is my favorite fish.
Oh yeah,
or favorite bass.
yeah,
There's something about that magic 3-pound range, isn't there?
yep.
They're perfect. They are still big enough to fight well, but they're still young enough to not be lazy.
They're basically just like angry little footballs at that size.
Yes.
Right. The first time I caught a 3-pound bass, I was very confused when I got it to the boat because I had never experienced a bass fight like that,
Right.
and I was shocked. And oddly, my personal best on conventional gear is probably I caught it earlier this week, and it was probably only about 2 or 2.5 pounds.
Nice. So,
But again, I don't really bass fish, so
you do right. And I don't. I grew up bass fishing. I grew up a fairly serious bass angler. My father was a very serious bass angler. I fished tournaments until I was 21 years old or so.
oh,
Distracted by something else.
sure.
Life, But yeah, I used to tournament fish, regional tournaments and stuff. So my largest is 10 pounds, 8 ounces
That's a real nice fish.
from Lake Fork in Texas.
That checks
And that wasn't that big of a fish for that lake.
out. No, that's practically a slot fish at Fork.
It's above a slot, but yes, you're right.
Right.
And my, I consider, I keep track of a in the city or in town PB, if that makes any sense.
Oh, sure.
Only because I caught a 7 earlier this year with Justin.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
on a Roadrunner of all things.
Yeah,
I was not bass fishing.
That was a weird day. We were fishing Grapevine Lake, and we were in Bret's boat, basically fishing the riprap of the dam and the areas alongside it. And for whatever reason, we were fishing the same lures in the same water, and I just kept catching like white bass after white bass after white bass, and Bret got nothing until he hooked a 7-pound largemouth.
It was a weird day.
Nice.
And then my best on the fly rod is about 5 and not about 5 1/4, is 5 1/4.
Oh, yeah. That's a nice fish.
From a small lake in East Texas. I was actually out there chasing a species of pickerel.
Yeah.
The red fins are supposed to be in that lake.
Gotcha.
So I had a pretty small little clouser on there trying to find a red fin. And I got one fish all day. And it was on a 4-weight. It was pretty good fish on a 4-weight. He was pretty angry with me, which is nice. Very cool.
So
Very cool.
I can tell you my favorite. I can remember my 2 most favorite bass trips.
Nice.
And one of them was a bunch of fly fishermen from like a forum back in the days of fishing forums. I mean, they still exist, but most social media has taken them over. But we got together and determined we were going to fish hookless flies. And we were just going to count how many blow-ups or whatever.
I know this trick. Sure.
And so I tied up a Dahlberg diver, which, for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it basically is a top water that sort of pops, but every time you pop it, it goes underwater a few inches and it comes back up. Really effective fly. But not having a hook on it meant I could really fish in some lily pad cover. And I got some ferocious blowups, where you could just feel the weight of the fish for just a second, before they spit it out. That was fun.
mm-hmm. That sounds pretty cool.
That is cool.
I think that would just drive me crazy.
I've done it with sunfish, little bluegill and stuff,
Yeah.
which is kind of fun. And I've done it with toads. Does that count?
Sure.
I remember that at least one time.
We were on a camping trip once, and a bunch of toads showed up at the camp.
Oh, wow.
I guess around our light.
Yeah.
So I cut the I cut the hook off a fly and was casting to these toads.
They were down in it too.
Fly fishing for toads.
They were going full ham on that thing. It was funny.
Oh, that's amazing.
They're probably so confused.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever been toad
like
fishing.
lift them up for a second. They just like wiggle their legs and spit it out and drop back down. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, they wouldn't let go. They were. It was so ridiculous. So that pretty much covers a largemouth. We don't really need to do much on it. It's the most popular game fish in the world.
Mm-hmm. Just about everyone who fishes has probably caught one.
Yes, cool. So over the next few weeks, Send us your largemouth bass photos and stories to FOTM@ifitswims.com. Pictures may make the webpage, and stories could be shared here. Before we head out, guys, you guys have anything else?
Happy New Year.
Exactly.
Indeed.
I'm looking forward to 2025 logging a lot more days on the water.
Good for you, man.
I think we can all say we'd love to try and do that.
Yeah, I made some adjustments in my career recently, and I will be hitting the water a good bit more. That's for sure.
There you
Excellent.
go.
Yeah. So, thanks for hanging out with us this month and this year. Do that like, subscribe, tell a friend thing. Enjoy your holidays, and thanks again. We are on the web at ifitswims.com and on Instagram at if_it_swims. All links to find us are available in the show notes, along with links to items covered this month. Our music was written for us by Dallas artist Jeff Hewitt. Join us again next month, and as always,